Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Georgette Bethina, Western Regional Executive for J.P. Morgan Chase Global Philanthropy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be here. Ask any CEO what the most important asset is to their company, and you'll likely hear the same answer from all of them, and it's their people. Talent is the lifeblood of our companies and our economy. That's particularly true in the Bay Area, where the success and growth of our economy and businesses is dependent on having a deep pool of highly skilled and highly educated workers. Of course, our region also needs a wide range of skilled workers across a range of industries and incomes. And the robust quality of life that we enjoy here is possible because of new generations of residents keeping our region vibrant and alive, bringing new creative ideas, thinking, new leadership, new ways of doing things, a new energy, and a vitality. Where regions falter is when they fail to attract and to retain the new lifeblood that is critical to our region. And there are worrisome signs that the Bay Area is beginning to hemorrhage its lifeblood. A recent Bay Area Council poll found that 46% of millennials, and those defined as being born after 1980 to 2000X, are looking to leave the region. And in terms of why, we heard a little bit about that earlier today, but the high cost of living, high housing costs, growing traffic congestions are some of the reasons that are cited. These issues diminish our quality of life and make the Bay Area less attractive. Unless we can figure out how to address these problems, we risk seeing our region's economy stagnate and really losing the diversity and vitality that have made it such an attractive place for all of us to live. Some estimates suggest that we don't have a sufficient pool of new workers that are within a 2-hour commute of the Bay Area to meet our future workforce needs. And there are plenty of other regions that are jumping to grab them. So the Bay Area may be the birthplace of Silicon Valley, but we also know that these problems mount. As these problems mount, other regions are moving very quickly to create their own versions of Silicon Valley and provide affordable housing and the quality of life that younger generations are seeking. Today, we're going to explore the threat of the Great Millennial Flight and what we can do to stop it. We've assembled a group of millennials and also what we're calling near millennials, I fall into that category, to share their experiences and insights about these issues and hear from them directly about what we need to do to address them. So please welcome our moderator, Audrey Cooper, who is the editor-in-chief of the San Francisco Chronicle. Thank you for joining. And joining Audrey, we have Kim Mai Cutler, who is a TechCrunch columnist and operating partner for Initialize Capital, who has researched and written extensively on the Bay Area's housing crisis. Rebecca Prozan, who is the chief of public policy for Google. And we have the Berkeley City Council member, Ben Bartlett, and also Caitlin Fox from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative.
I just want to thank the Bay Area Council for having us all here, but mostly for telling me this week that I counted as a millennial, which was the best news I've gotten all month, I think. So you're not going to
I'm the only one shaking my head.
You're not going to own the millennial?
No, I can't.
Oh, you don't have to ask me twice. So the topic of this is what we're doing to retain millennials and how we can reverse this trend that seems to be pretty clear that they're looking to leave the Bay Area. So just a show of hands, how many of you have actually thought about leaving the Bay Area? Just 2 of us. All right. No? You're here for good.
Third generation.
You're third generation. You're going to inherit grandma's house. Maybe. I want to start on the far end, Caitlin, with you. So I get why Facebook would care about whether or not the millennials are going to hang around. Why do you at the initiative care about that? I know you're studying it. Can you share what got you into this and what you've seen so far in your work?
Sure. So I work at Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and as you mentioned, I think we are interested in it both because our sister organization, Facebook, is obviously very concerned about not being able to recruit talent, but we really care about it as an equity issue. It's very obvious that the Bay Area has become unaffordable. Over half of renter households are housing cost burdened, meaning they spend over 30% of their income on housing. And that means that this region has become unaffordable not only to low-income people, but to the workforce that is the lifeblood of this region. So teachers, firefighters, police officers, and where that line goes up every minute. And so we really care about the Bay Area being an equitable and just region, which it has been in the past and is increasingly not. And as we think about the effect on millennials, I think a lot of it is that millennials themselves can't afford to live here, but they also want, I can speak as one myself, we want to live in places that are diverse and dynamic and that we feel are representative of the type of community and values that we want to be a part of. And I think that millennials are looking at the Bay Area and starting to realize that that's not possible here.
So you're studying this issue right now. What are some of the things that you're finding out about this?
And we've already started investing in this. We were supportive of several ballot initiatives in November that led to the $2.5 billion in affordable housing dollars in several of the counties in the Bay Area. We've also supported research through the Turner Center at Berkeley. We have come to realize that there is just a lot we don't know about housing. We don't know how much it costs. You can't look at a block and say, this is what all these rental properties cost and what the quality is and who's living in them and what happens to a person when they get access to stable housing, what happens to their children's educational outcomes, their health, their economic prospects. We don't have that data, and so we're trying to support a lot of that. We also are learning that grassroots advocacy is really important. There's a lot of latent energy around housing. A lot of people, as the Bay Area Council studies have shown, have a lot of concern and anxiety about housing, but they haven't been able to translate that into action. I think that there's a lot of potential given the votes that came out for the ballot initiatives in November, but people aren't showing up to their council meetings. They're not advocating for the thing that keeps them up at night. And we need to figure out, how do we activate millennials, the people that are so anxious about this issue, to vote and to become active around these issues. And then the third area is in innovation. We're an LLC, so we can invest and give grants and engage in political processes. And we have a lot of flexibility, and with that, we want to be the risk capital that invests in things like new approaches to construction, new financing mechanisms. Housing is an area that has seen virtually no innovation for decades. It's built in the same way it's been built for 50 years. It's financed in the same way it's been financed for 50 years. And we need to innovate in order to get out of this really, really deep hole.
So anyone who doesn't already follow Kimai on Twitter should, because it's like taking a master class in housing issues every day. I look at it. So I know you're just itching to say something, but part of this topic about how you keep millennials is not just affordability, but it's also family appropriate housing. I mean, it can be affordable, but if your kid is living in a closet, as mine was for a while, it's not a long-term solution. So I know you have some ideas of what we can do to make it affordable and family friendly.
Well, I mean, I can just tell you talk about just kind of the anecdotal history of my family. Like my mom's side of my family, they were refugees from Vietnam. They were resettled in a refugee camp in Guam, then resettled in the Midwest, and then my mom, and my grandfather came out to the Bay Area on a Greyhound bus around 1980 or so. And in within a year or two of moving here, my mom and her aunt, in their early to mid 20s, were able to buy their first condo with $5,000 down each, a generation ago. And today, when I go down to the town where I'm from, the median home price is like $2 million. They're opening Apple Campus 2 this year, which has 14.
You grew up in Cupertino.
Yeah, and so they're opening Apple Campus 2, which has 14,000 workers. They're not building any housing. And in fact, the Cupertino Union School District, they had a demographer's report last year showing that they were projecting enrollment declines of 600 to 900 kids, in the incoming kindergarten classes, because young families are not able to afford housing in that city anymore. And I go down there and I go down to meetings and I'll bring it up with people, and they're like, "Your alternative facts."
I get that too sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm like, if you're going to approve these large campuses, then there should be some, if you're going to approve large campuses, take the corporate tax revenue from these large companies, and kind of, and it's not like, 90% of Apple's Bay Area workers don't even live in Cupertino, and none of these other cities can collect that tax revenue. If you're going to build that campus, take that tax revenue, it's not responsible to not build housing for those workers.
But you also, we were talking about family housing and people,
Right.
boomers who
Right.
have had their kids
Right.
kids have left, and now they're because of Prop 13,
Right.
unable to
Right.
go.
I mean, there was a legislative analyst's office report, Common Claims about Proposition 13, that was published, I think, sometime last year. And it was looking at the rate of property turnover in the state of California. So it used to be double the rate that it is now. So like only 6% of properties maybe change hands every year. And the property tax system in the state incentivizes people to stay in their existing housing and not downsize to something that might be like more appropriate to whatever their lifestyle needs are. And this is happening at the same time that this region just is not able to build more family-sized housing. If you look at where most of the development is zoned, I mean, it tends to be in urban areas or cities like San Francisco and Oakland, because the suburbs basically zone themselves out and exclude everyone. And in those urban areas, I mean, what developers can build or what can pencil is typically, studios, 1-bedrooms, and 2-bedroom apartments. At best, you can get 2 bedrooms if you really like kind of try and incentivize it with the zoning policy. But there's not new family-sized housing that's coming on. It's basically whatever exists here, because we've built out all the flatlands in the Bay Area since the 1970s. Whatever we have is what we have, and it's not being turned over because of the way our tax system works.
So, Rebecca, you've been in San Francisco for a while now. You've seen how much harder, when we already thought it was bad 15 years ago, how much harder it's gotten. On the Bay Area Council's survey, it said 76% of respondents felt that this problem with millennials leaving the Bay Area was going to actually hurt the Bay Area economy, which struck me as incredibly pessimistic. From your point of view, do you think that's overblown? Do you have the same fears that maybe the other tech companies do? And what do you think can be done about it?
I started in Google just doing San Francisco, but now that I'm doing the Bay Area, I'm getting a completely different perspective on that. And my sense is there are a significant number of employees, my colleagues, who are frustrated about congestion, frustrated about how much money they are putting away in rent. 2 people I know who've just moved here from the administration to take jobs in policy I have never spent this much money on rent in their life. And I think, yes, they're millennials now. They may or may not be buying cars. They may be renting, but at a certain point, they are going to get more seasoned like myself. They're going to want to buy a house. They're going to want to have kids. And I don't think they see that future in San Francisco. They don't see it because of, and the school system is, I realize, a completely different conversation, but it's hard not to have that factor into, where do you want to put your roots in for the next 40 years. On the housing issue, I did want to say, Mountain View is currently looking at building 10,000 units in the North Bay Shore area. How those units are going to be built is a fascinating question, because it's not just getting to yes on the 10,000 units, which the EIR blew up, but that's that's another side story to it. So we have publicly advocated for a phased-in approach. So 3,500, and I went to law school, so whatever the latter part is. But we have to decide how many of those are going to be 1-bedroom or 3-bedroom. How many and how many cars are going to be allotted per garage, and what was the equation that that the EIR used for how the traffic was going to be a problem if the 10,000 units were built. And so these questions are really complex and difficult, but we're going to have to figure it out, because we are bursting at the seams.
So, Ben, you have the privilege of being the only elected on the panel. One of the things about millennials is a lot of times they don't want to live in the far out suburbs, which is where we saw a lot of housing being built, especially during the first .com boom. Now they want to be in the city. They want to be in Berkeley. They want to be in Oakland. I have to ask you about this news that happened this week about Berkeley considering a $10,000 fee for builders of affordable housing or below market rate housing. That seems at odds with the need to actually build more of this. What do you think about that, and where are you seeing Berkeley, at least, being an answer in this?
Well, it's funny. Well, first off, of course, so Berkeley's the home of progressivism, right? And the home of solutions. We pride ourselves in solving many of the issues that plague our society. And of course, I'm from Berkeley 5 generations, and I take that task very seriously. My grandfather was a realtor, and he personally brought in many of the African-American families into Berkeley despite their racial restrictive zoning. So the issue of preventing housing production is very, very dear to me, because not only because how it affects our economy, and how it affects our ability of our young people, who I represent, to participate in our society, it's also just counterproductive morally. So, asking to your question, the $10,000 fee, that's actually calling for a study to look at the recommendations of one of the housing advisory commissions, and the next report that called for a certain range. So that'll be debated with information, and I don't know how that's going to play. But I do know that Berkeley as a whole, we've been pioneers. We have met 266% of our housing guidelines for market rate development, which is greater than all of our neighbors in the Bay Area. So our system of incorporating human needs into development seems to be working.
You're also a proponent of more in-law units. Do you want to talk about that? How optimistic are you that you're going to get that?
Certainly, very optimistic. So innovation is the key component of all of my initiatives that come out of my office. And so one is streamlining in-law units or ADU development. And I have a team of the top realtors in the city and developers and top bankers and financiers. And we've assembled this apparatus to market through the university and to all the homeowners to enhance the value of their property with these additional units, these backyard little apartments. My sister lives in one, and so do my colleagues. There are great ways for people to participate. There are also good ways for people who are low income, who are in their homes on the verge of losing and becoming displaced, that can raise their property values by having the added income. So we have a goal of 3,000 in 3 years.
Now, is that new construction of in-law units, or do you have a problem like San Francisco does of having unpermitted ones?
Well, we have a few unpermitted, but this is new. So there'll be new construction. We have a financing regime. We have prefabricated units. And on that note, I want to talk about also in terms of the housing innovation and construction methods. They've actually been the same since the 1840s. And the first law we did in Berkeley when I got elected was to create prefabricated micro units to house the homeless as a form of introducing the prefabricated model. And of course, we had pushback from labor, as every city in California did. But we sat them down and made the case that this market for new housing for people that are on the edge and want to enter markets and enter a lifestyle of living somewhere will overshadow and overtake any fears they have about losing this particular job site. So now they're out there making their own facilities to produce these, and the laws we wrote are being adopted by the state and around the state as a whole. So it's exciting.
So we only have a little bit of time left. I think maybe what will be most useful, since we're not always in a room full of the people who can actually help affect some of these things that we're talking about, what is one thing that you would hope everybody would advocate for or do, or that we should look at to actually keep more millennials in the Bay Area?
So I think if any of you, I think there are a lot of strong kind of organizing kind of movements building in the cities, but it's the suburbs where we really have issues, and that's actually probably where it's easier to build more family-sized housing. So if you live in a suburb, please, please, please advocate for more housing in your suburb. I can't tell you, when I think of all the kids that I graduated high school with, a lot of them are realizing that if they want to stay in the Bay Area, even if they went to a college, a good college and then have a reasonable paying job and stuff. I mean, a lot of them are realizing that if they want to stay and raise families here, they're going to have to move in with their parents. Like, I remember talking to the mayor of Cupertino, who was just termed out last year, and I was asking him about his situation as a Taiwanese immigrant who came to this country in the late 80s, and he revealed, he was like, yeah, his daughter, who's a lawyer and has a law degree, was just living at home with him. And that's just what a lot of people from my generation are starting to realize, and that's weird, and it's scary, and it's not Californian, frankly speaking. And so if you go back home to your city councils and you can just say, we need that apartment building, we need to reconsider, the shape and form of single family zoning. We need to reconsider these things because this is not sustainable.
Do you think that we've gotten over the NIMBYism problem in the Inner Bay and that it's still persistent out there? Is that what you're saying?
NIMBYism is a very complex. I even probably use it too liberally, to be honest, because it's a catch-all for a lot of different. The reason why someone might oppose a development is different on a case-by-case basis. I mean, in some cases, it is like in practice, it is effectively excluding different kinds of people, but in other cases, it's a negotiating tactic for certain types of concessions, whether that is, a higher percentage of affordable housing, or maybe there are just different impacts that, can be quickly resolved. And so it's really hard to discern what is what without having that conversation.
Rebecca, what is the one thing you hope this group advocates for, can help us accomplish in the Bay Area?
So one thing we've done really successfully at Google is we have public policy talks for our employees. So we invite the Bay Area councils come in and spoke about shuttles. Spurs come in and talked about transportation and housing just in a general sense. And I think, more information about, it turns out that 75% of San Francisco is zoned for 4 stories or less. So it's little tidbits like that sort of help to explain how we got into this mess in the first place. And I think that is certainly something that I know each of you, if you wanted to do it, could pull it off. It doesn't have to be political. It's completely just, overview of how we got here to begin with.
I'd agree with that. It's important to educate people as to the root of the exclusionary policies going on in California, and they don't come from good places. And second, recognizing that politicians are under tremendous pressure from neighborhood groups and League of California Cities and labor and et cetera. You've got to help them get the resources to centralize the decision-making authority. It's if you have resources, you must deploy them to empower centralization of housing authority.
Caitlin, you get to wrap it up.
Well, I'm going to cheat and do 2, but one is just mostly seconding a lot of what people have said here. This is a highly complex problem that needs to be solved at the national level, the state level, but it's so much is done locally. And so to go to your city council means to give your elected officials the cover they need to advocate for housing is incredibly important, and there's a lot you can do just in your own town. And then the second thing I'll say is a very high-level esoteric thing, but I would say to start reframing the conversation, even just in how you talk with your peers, your colleagues about housing, with your elected officials. This is a broken system. And my goal is that we talk about housing in a few years the way we talk about the criminal justice system now. It's a broken system that is a social justice issue, it is an economic issue, and it is not working for anyone. It is not just working for the low-income people. It's now obviously not working for teachers, but it's also not working for the person who owns a home in beautiful Pack Heights that has been living there for decades. It is affecting our entire economy, and it is affecting everybody. And so we need to stop talking about it like it only affects certain people. And if you start to talk about it that way, people will start acting like it is that kind of an issue.
I think that's really well said. Thank you all for being with us today. We're all going to go have avocado toast or something together now, right?